Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face.
So my next conversation is with Jack Blum and Sharon Corder. They're both with Reel Canada. That's REEL, Canada.ca. You're going to want to dig into the website. You're going to want to find out more about that, especially if you're a school teacher. You're going to find out why that is as we get deeper into the interview. But don't touch that dial. We talk about snow and sass. We get into what National Film Day in Canada is really all about. We talk about lack of access and about the arts and how important it is to making change of any kind. We talk about Canadian literature and public engagement. We talk about Tom Thompson and the Great Pines. We talk about art and the importance of that and why immigrants make the best Canadians. This is we had a lot of fun on this interview, and I don't too often get to interview two people at the same time, but Jack and Sharon were delightful. It was informative. I learned a ton, and I stepped into this thing called Reel Canada. So you're going to want to find out more about that and why it even exists and what it's actually doing in Canada, and frankly, it's got a global reach, which is remarkable as well. So coming right up, Jack and Sharon, and sharing some insights on all things Canadian film-wise. Don't forget, davidpecklive.com. You can find out more about the work that I'm doing, writing, speaking, and so on. Reach out to me there. And if you're interested in financially supporting what the work that I'm doing here on Face to Face, you can do that through Patreon. If you'd like to advertise on Face to Face, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to send you some information on that. We're currently and actively looking for sponsors and people who'd like to add here. We've got quite a reach now. You know, did you know that I'm over 1 million downloads? It's pretty remarkable. So step into that if you like and reach out. And don't forget, you can also hear more of Face to Face on rabble.ca, but you can also reach into other people's lives, other people's writing and thinking through blogs and other podcasts as well there. And also, folks, if you can't support the work I'm doing financially through Patreon, I totally get that, but would love for you to leave a review or a quote on iTunes. That would be so appreciated. Don't touch that dial. Reel Canada coming up with Jack Blum and Sharon Corder. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We're joined by two very special guests with us here today. We have Sharon Corder and Jack Blum from Reel Canada, who are going to, well, we're going to go a little deep into all things Canadian and all things film. Thanks to you both for joining me here today on Face to Face.
Thanks pleasure. For having us.
So I think probably the natural place to start is, and we should tell everyone out there and just maybe let them in on our little joke. We're all of an age where we're still marveling at the technology, or at least I am anyway, and that we actually made this call work. There was 3 of us. Wow, isn't this remarkable? You know,
we are technically magnificent.
Yeah, we did not. That's right. We didn't need, what was it? Cans, string, and a bar of soap, wasn't it?
Something like that.
Not the bar of soap, Dave. That's something else.
Oh, that's something else. Got it. Tell us about either of you, both of you. Take it away. What's Reel Canada? Why does it exist? And let's go from there.
So Reel Canada, we started it in 2005, and our original idea was we wanted young people to have some awareness of the great Canadian films that we make in this country, and we created this festival format where we come to a high school, the kids participate in organizing the festival, they program the films that they want to see, and in the beginning, every event would be maybe 5 or 6 different venues within the school. And
why we did that is because we were very aware that not only young people, but most Canadians don't have any access. They just don't know about the films that we make. And Jack and I come out of the film and television industry. And even within the industry, we'd be at a dinner party and our friends would be going, there's nothing any good out there. And we'd go, what do you mean? And we realized, and we said, well, have you seen this? And they said, no, I haven't seen that. Have you seen this? No, I haven't seen that. And so we became very aware that there was just no access. People didn't know that it existed, and they didn't have any way to see it, even if they did. So we thought, let's start with young people.
And let's start with some high schools in Toronto. Well, it was very, very successful, particularly the way in which the kids got engaged and the teachers got engaged. In some cases, the whole school got engaged, and it grew very quickly to the point where I'm leaping over some steps, and we'll get back to those. But now we're across the country. We're in all 10 provinces and territories. We do 100 events a year. We
with the schools
in French and English with schools, and there's a very, very high demand. Partly because we evolved the program in certain ways that maybe Sharon will talk about.
Well, we decided that right off the bat that we wanted to make it exciting. That the point is that we're not bringing in broccoli to your school.
Right.
These are movies. They're fun.
Hey, come on, Sharon. Depending on how you present broccoli, it can be very exciting.
Yes and no is the answer to that. This is actually, I think of it more like candy. Movies to me are candy. And I don't want them to think that it's good for them, although they really are. But I wanted them to just have the sheer pleasure of them. So we thought how we got together with other professionals in the industry and with educators and started talking about the best ways to do this. And we came up with the film festival format, which is certainly we love. We go to TIFF every year and get to see all the movies, and it's great. So the idea was not just to flip out a DVD across the path, but to say, here, we're going to come to your school. We're going to set up big screens and speakers.
We're going to bring actors and directors to talk to you after the film.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so they actually get to meet these amazing people.
So the desire is to grow a desire not only for Canadian film, but just film in general, storytelling, get people passionate about just watching a great piece of art.
So exactly right. So first of all, giving them something that's outside of the mainstream to grow that appetite. And also, it very quickly became about Canada and giving them an opportunity to talk about Canadian stories, the way in which they are reflected in them in a way that Hollywood movies don't reflect their experience.
Something we discovered immediately almost. We said when we started out, we wanted to pattern this on what had happened in the 70s, I guess, 70s and 80s with Canadian literature and how that just...
There was a real fight, sort of a campaign to get Canadian literature into the education system.
And now it was, and that was so great, and everybody read Canadian books. And then as we got into the schools, we understood that that has actually disappeared. They don't teach Canadian literature in high schools anymore. And we were stunned to find that out. So
individual teachers do occasionally, but it's not actually part of what you have to learn.
So we were running into people who were in university even who had never read a Canadian novel. And God knows that we don't have any question that we stand high in the world stature for our writers.
How can you get into university and not have read Fifth Business?
Oh, goodness me.
Easily.
It really is quite a steep hill to climb in this country to make people aware of the great work that is done here.
We were at a university that I don't want to embarrass by saying what it was.
Can you tell us what it rhymes with, Sharon?
No, and that would be, I think you might guess. I think you're pretty bright. We were speaking to 100 graduating educators.
Pre-service teachers, they're called. They're just about to graduate and enter the system.
So they've been through high school, they've been through university, and now they've got their teaching certificates. They're going out into the world to teach. And we tried it out on them, and we said, how many of you have heard, we didn't say have you read, how many of you have heard of Mordecai Richler? About 25 of them had heard of the guy.
Had heard of him, had heard of Alice Munro. This was pre-Nobel.
Pre-Nobel. How many have heard of Alice Munro? It was pre-Nobel, but not like she was obscure. How many of you had heard of, I forget who the third one was, And then we got to Margaret Atwood.
Margaret Lawrence. Margaret Atwood, about 40 people.
About 40 people. She's better known.
And bear in mind, it was always the same people. So for 75% of them, it was like just a black wasteland.
You were building on a foundation, yes.
So then we started talking about the filmmakers and the films, and there was nothing. There was zero awareness.
No. There were 10, 15, 20 people who knew some of the most famous. Then they were the same ones who knew who
the authors were.
So
we realized there was a real need among teachers and students to get a chance to talk about Canada, to talk about what it means to be Canadian, and to relate it ideally to the stories that we tell about ourselves here.
It was unimaginable to us to think of growing up, because this didn't happen to us. And I'm an American, so my God, I grew up with so much Americana. Jack is a Canadian. He grew up with Canadiana. To the idea that you would be in high school and that you would never see a story, read a story that reflects your reality at all, just seemed to be creating a huge social dissonance. How can that be true? Well, how can you never see yourself reflected?
And maybe I'm jumping the gun here, because I definitely want to get into Indigenous stories and Indigenous storytelling. In fact, just yesterday I was interviewing Darlene Naponce about her new film Falls Around Her. It was at TIFF. We just didn't connect. I mean, what a brilliant film, beautiful, good. It's a gorgeous film too.
And Tantu is gorgeous in it.
Well, the funny story is that I got the phone number for Darlene, but actually I was given Tantu's phone number. So when I called, I got Tantu, and we actually had a lovely chat, and I was able to congratulate her before we actually got into the conversation with Darlene. So we had a good laugh about that all the way around. But I guess it just the idea that the Canadian students, I mean, it almost starts to make sense as to why we don't have a better understanding for these issues. As I hear you guys say, 15, 10, 5, like, why hasn't this been more a part of the curriculum?
The way in which Sharon used to, we sometimes talk about this, Sharon would say that movies are like our dreams. And how would you feel if every night you went to bed and you woke up the next morning having dreamed about someone else's life?
Like your neighbors, the wealthy neighbors down the street.
The noisy neighbors down the street.
The noisy, wealthy, politically dysfunctional neighbors down the street.
There's something very...
I have a few of those neighbors too.
Well, we do. But I'm just saying that the idea that we see American stuff. And it turned out, because as we got to know these kids and talked with them and went into school after school, and these schools are so diverse. They're not like American schools. We've gone to schools where we were in such a minority as white people. And it was...
And 100 languages spoken in the school in every conceivable country of origin. It's really exciting.
And then you see what they see on TV and movies, and it doesn't reflect that world at all.
And the Canadian movies that we've programmed and that it's easy to program and find they look different. The people on screen look different, and they look like Canadians. And Canadian kids feel that when they watch, for the most part. So when you mentioned Indigenous filmmaking, it's very interesting because just a couple of years in, as we started to get further afield outside of Toronto, going to some northern communities, and again, it was Sharon noticed that there were substantial populations of Indigenous kids, and they weren't being served, and they weren't being served at that point by our program.
So, and from my point of view, I felt that the non-Indigenous kids weren't being served as well. That these two communities lived in two solitudes, and they didn't understand each other or care for each other
or communicate with each other.
And so the idea, we started then working diligently, this is about 12 years ago, to start searching more aggressively for Indigenous work and Indigenous filmmakers. And Imaginative helped us, the Indigenous Film Festival, and they became very helpful in introducing us to people. And so the idea was very much that we would bring in Indigenous filmmakers who were cool and doing interesting work, and not broccoli.
Right.
And let the Indigenous kids see themselves reflected in this way and see their lives reflected. Have the non-Indigenous kids see that what stereotypes they might have about Indigenous peoples may not be accurate, and probably weren't accurate. And then we could bring in these very cool people who were making movies to talk with them and reflect those realities.
So it's like you have created obviously a platform, and we'll talk about RCTV as well, I'm sure, and a variety of tools and so on. But it's almost as if you're in the business of public engagement, but youthful public engagement. You're about creating passionate energy around issues that matter, but through this Canadiana film lens.
Absolutely, that's what it has turned into. Now, we kind of short-circuited there a little bit because we started with the films in the schools, and then we started to get requests from English as a second language adult groups and communities.
And they wanted to participate in the high school events.
So we said, no, that wouldn't work. So we said, okay, well, we'll do a few. And we started doing them down at the Lightbox, the TIFF Lightbox down at downtown Toronto, and bringing in 1,000 new Canadians at a time to 3 different screenings that they would choose. They would choose what movies they wanted to see. And we would bring in filmmakers, actors, directors, whatever, to engage with them. And those have turned into massively meaningful engagement.
So that's called our Welcome to Canada program now. And now we do that across the country as well.
And in fact, last week we had 3 events at Pier 21 in Halifax, where we're showing a new Indigenous film called Kayak to Climb to brand new Canadians with a young Métis actor.
One of the members of the cast there. It's our oldest Canadians talking to our newest Canadians.
It really is remarkable. I so love it, and I have to just get a shout out. And I know we chatted about this briefly before we were recording, but I've interviewed 3 of your board members, and interviewed some of your Mina Shum and Charles Officer and Adam Agoyan, Elena Sinabamswin, Don McKellar, Deepa Mehta. I mean, it's just seeing those names and having had conversations, and I hope people go back and listen to the interviews on Face to Face, but all wonderful people.
All of them have done many high schools. All those people.
Amazing.
They've all given us a lot of time.
They've
so
high
great.
Schools, and they've talked to new Canadians. In fact,
Amazing.
You go back and ask Adam Agoyan, he will tell you, which he tells many people publicly, that the new Canadian screenings, of all the screenings, and he's done screenings all over the world, they have been the most meaningful to him.
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, congratulations! Congratulations! Yeah,
thank you very much. So
it's
I
remarkable
just want to pick
achievement.
up on what you said before about public engagement, because it leads us to sort of the next leap that we took in our programming, and we got out of the strict educational market and created National Canadian Film Day.
We didn't get out of it, we added to it.
We added to it. We busted out of it. We extended our reach.
Right.
And created National Canadian Film Day so that all Canadians would have a chance, at least one day a year, to have this kind of exciting discovery of Canadian film that we were finding in the schools and with the new Canadians.
And so that happens every April. This is our 6th year.
So April 17th, 2019 is National Canadian Film Day number 6.
And who we engage with there is everybody. And we worked with a major PR firm a few years ago, and they were like, okay, now who's your demographic?
Who's your demographic?
We go, well, everybody. They go, no, you can't have everybody. We go, well, so far we're working with military bases, Legion halls.
Wonderful.
Libraries, senior citizen homes, taverns, record and video stores,
film festivals,
community
across the
centers,
country.
film festivals,
art galleries, elementary schools. So we're going from cradle to grave, from right to left, from rural to downtown, every city in Canada, and it offended them as a concept.
In 6 years, we've grown. We're now in upwards of 600 distinct communities across the country. We're in every corner of the country, in all kinds of places.
And this year, there are so far about 1,000 screenings on the day.
Wow, that's really, really remarkable. Yeah,
and not only across Canada, sorry to interrupt, but around the world as well.
It's, I just, as I've learned more about you guys, and I'll definitely dig some more, because I think I mentioned to you again offline that I'd say about 70% of my guests in the last 3 years have been filmmakers, hot docs, mostly TIFF related, But what's been interesting is I would say of those 70% of my guests, I'd say 40 to 60% of them are Canadian filmmakers. So it's been a really interesting shift for me, and just diving into this whole kind of world that I almost didn't know existed. And you guys provide this beautiful opportunity for independent filmmakers as well, it seems to me, from what little I know of you.
Well,
and that's
absolutely,
wonderful.
because one of the big problems that we have in this country as artists of any kind, but especially films require a lot of money to publicize. So when you're sitting in front of your TV or you're on your computer, what comes at you is massive billions of dollars from a big machine. Canada doesn't have that. So people don't even hear about what gets made.
Right.
And we're providing many things, one of which is alternative distribution, so that people actually have an opportunity to see these films, because we're making some wonderful films. I'm not saying they're all wonderful. I'm not that crazy.
Right.
But there are really there's
a lot of good ones they're just wonderful, and they deserve to be seen, and they're awfully good fun. The thing that we're doing, it's funny in Canada sometimes. There's a bit of a resistance to new ideas, but this is the kind of thing that's been done before, just not very often. And I like to talk to people about why we all know Tom Thompson's The Jack Pine.
I only learned this in the last few years. I didn't know this.
Why? But you, David, having gone to school here, know that image.
Mm-hmm.
No,
So
I know the image.
The reason that you know it is because in the early 30s, Arthur Lismer, one of the group of seven, armed with new lithographic technology, printed thousands of it and about 5 other iconic Canadian pieces of art, and distributed them to elementary schools where they hung for decades. And that is why we know those paintings. And similarly, in the 40s and 50s, when the National Film Board started, they drove projectors around from town to town and would book the town hall and show the films that they were making to folks in communities large and small.
Right.
So there is kind of a hearty grassroots tradition of getting this stuff out to the people in Canada. It just doesn't happen that often.
And what we feel, like for me, I'm an immigrant, and I think immigrants, frankly, make the best Canadians. Is my prejudice, because
I think that might be the soundbite for the interview today, by the way.
But I do think that we, coming from other countries, see the country with fresh eyes and appreciate it. And even the self-deprecation, which does get on the nerves occasionally, you can see that there's a certain modesty that is that leads to some perhaps civil behavior from time to time, which is
right.
To be desired. But the idea that Canada is worth something is something that I feel us new Canadians can say out loud. Canadians only get to say that out loud during the Olympics or during hockey season, or there's so few opportunities to say what people feel about the values of this country.
And to celebrate it, celebrate the country.
So it's nationalism, and which is a terrifying word these days.
It is, yeah.
But and not one that I endorse. But the idea of nationalism as a value for taking care of each other and for valuing our neighbors
and our diversity.
Well,
that's what I mean.
And it's interesting, Sharon. It's a really interesting distinction to me. I wonder if there's something to be said for sort of national pride versus nationalism, right? I mean,
I hope so.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's kind of more. You're talking more about community, frankly. It seems to me.
Yes, feeling the sense of community that there are things that we feel as Canadians that
bind us.
Terry Fox was something that happened to everyone.
Right.
That happened to everybody from wherever you lived and whatever religion you are, whatever skin color you've got. Everybody felt that, and there's a bond that I think is of value as long as we don't turn it into a us versus them.
Yeah, absolutely. Which seems to be so easy to do, right? The divisive. Position
these
seems
days,
to be the
especially.
one to take. Yeah. Polarization is the way to go, it seems. Yeah. So Are people watching Canadian films? I mean, what's the word on the street there about, are they getting out into the real world?
They're watching Canadian films on National Canadian Film Day, I'll tell you that.
That's right, 1,000 screenings, yeah.
And that's just the start
Yeah,
of it.
we're anticipating something like 70,000 Canadians will attend these screenings.
In person. But also, we have hooked up the last few years with all of the broadcasters. And they are, if you go to our website, you can see this. National Canadian Film Day, you can see that they have schedules for the day of Canadian films.
So that's Bell Media, Chorus, Hollywood Suite.
Don't start mentioning because
now I'm going to leave people out. They're going to be upset.
Yeah, so no, there are many, and so let's not even try.
Right.
But also there will be streaming services from the CBC and others. So if you've got a TV or a computer, or you live near many, many, many centers, you can see a film for free on that day.
Yeah, that's amazing. Really,
because we don't want to leave the North out. And we don't want to leave rural places out. And, we want everyone to have the opportunity. That the whole idea of Canada for me as a somewhat newcomer is the inclusivity.
So
that's what we want to reflect.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Let's say I'm a public school teacher. I'm a high school teacher looking to bring in a film, want to do a panel discussion. Where do I start? How much is it going to cost me, etc.?
Okay, two different things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So first of all, high schools, teachers everywhere. Hello, teachers.
That's right. That's right.
Real, REEL, realcanada.ca. Go to that website. If you send us a note, we will hunt you down. Believe me, we will find you. We will talk to you, and we will work something out. And the charge to your school or to you or to your principal or your school board is nothing.
Zero.
We bring all that to your school for free. So definitely get a hold of us. If you want to sign up for a National Film Day screening, that's canfilmday.ca. And
what we're doing for high schools specifically on National Canadian Film Day is a thing we call RCTV, RC for Real Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I believe it's close to 200 schools.
It's over 200 schools.
And about 15,000 students. And it will be a live broadcast with everybody tuning in, the schools that are participating. There are two films on offer. One is Kayak to Climb To, which I think we mentioned before. And the director and one of the leads will be here in Toronto at the Google YouTube space.
The YouTube creative space.
Where we'll be broadcasting from. And the other film is Remember, and we'll have Adam Agoyan. And they will be answering questions live from high school students from coast to coast.
So it's an interactive talk show. Kids can tweet their questions. They send us videos. They send in Happy National Canadian Film Day videos. They compete for prizes by answering questions. It's quite a unique thing, and it's fun. Involves kids from right across the country.
My favorite, it gets me so jazzed talking about this, and I'm looking forward to hosting one of those panel discussions for you someday down the road.
Cool.
I hope, honestly, I hope we can talk about that. One of my favorite films of all time, poster framed on the wall. I interviewed Don McKellar, and Tina Keeper, this past TIFF about his new film, and through Black Spruce, and I was able to say to him, with some, intimate, with a sort of an intimate posture, that Last Night is one of my favorite films of all time.
Terrific.
It's a terrific film.
Poster framed on my wall, one of the most beautiful endings, and I hope that's enough for people to get out there and want to watch it again,
it's a great film.
Or just watch it for the first time. Wonderful cameo by David Cronenberg, Sandra Oh. I mean, so tell me, what couple favorite Canadian films? Can we talk about that? Is anything bubbling to the surface?
Oh, you're putting us in a very
I know.
difficult position.
I know.
Yeah, I really feel as the artistic director, I can't. That it's like saying, "Who's your favorite child?"
Well, it's the worst, right?
I
Top
like
5
Sally
films.
The best.
That's right. That's right.
I can't like Sally the best. That's just not
it's
possible.
it's a crazy question to say. What's your favorite song of all time, or what's your favorite?
No, exactly. Who's your favorite singer? Who's your favorite? What I can say is that there are many filmmakers that I really love, and I'm not as knowledgeable about all of the Quebec filmmakers as I would like to be, which is why we have Quebec partners there helping us all the time, finding things and telling us what's going on. But always when I'm at TIFF, I'd make a point to see several of the Quebecois films. They're doing gorgeous work. We're doing some gorgeous work. There's a new film coming out. Oh God, don't let me forget it just as we're talking about it. Jack will have to help with that in a minute. So there are several new films coming out right now that are wonderful. There are young filmmakers coming up. Of course, I like all our classic filmmakers, Adam Agoyan, David Cronenberg, Deepa Mehta, Don McKellar. We have regional filmmakers. There have been some wonderful films made out east that are great. I love the stuff from the 70s. It's the Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz's 45th anniversary this year. And we're very hopeful that we're going to have a Skype in from Richard Dreyfuss for the screening at the Vancouver International Film Festival.
That's wonderful. That'll be a really nice surprise for people. Well, I think this is a nice sort of segue to the whole Snow and Sass thing too, right? Celebrating 100 years. Tell me about Snow and Sass.
Okay, well, so what that's about is that we were talking with our funders, and they were wondering if there was anything in particular we could commemorate. And we said, well, it's 2019. What would be better to commemorate than Back to God's Country, which is the most successful silent film Canada ever made. And it was by Nell Shipman, who is well known in film circles as a big pioneer. She wrote it and starred in it, and it's quite something. And
it's the first Canadian film made in Canada by Canadians, which is very much what we're about. Because God knows there's a lot of movies that are made here that have nothing to do, that aren't made by Canadians. They're Hollywood movies.
And we are not against those.
They're fine. It's great.
They're wonderful.
Yeah, we love having them here.
And they pay for our friends' lives and their homes and their cars, and that's terrific. Right. And some of them are great films.
They're not the films that we are interested in promoting to a Canadian audience.
So we looked at that and we thought, well, how do we program? What's the common denominator of that we can find coming out of Back to God's Country? And Nell Shipman is as sassy as it gets, and it's there's as much snow as you can imagine in that picture.
Right.
And so we thought that there was an argument to be made that we can call it what Canadian films are often is full of snow and sass.
100 years of snow.
So we've got 100 films that we put on our website to say these films, snow and sass.
So we would sit around and go, someone would name a title, and either it would be snow or sass. Or both.
Or there were some that weren't in either.
Some
so
that weren't either.
But Cronenberg is sass. Like there's just, you don't even have to worry about it.
Or Denis Arcand, know, it's inarguable.
So I love the passion, the intention, the commitment coming through on the phone. It would be so much fun to be actually doing this face to face. It's so ironic. I call my podcast face to face. Very few of them are. Yeah, one day when I'm worth millions and I have a huge following, I'll have a wonderful studio. Or just when the
technology gets better, and we can just materialize.
That's right. Yeah. Where's William Shatner when you need him?
Really.
Yeah, but tell me about that a little bit. You both have backgrounds in TV and film, and where does that come from? Is this, I don't know, is this just a love for the moving image? Is this it's back to that popcorn smell when you walk in the door of a theater? What's going on here?
It's different for each of us. I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario. We both started in the theater. And when I started out as a young actor and a director, the explosion of Canadian theater, Canadian plays was so exciting. And I've just always, Canadian culture in general, whether it's Alex Colville or David Pratt on Christopher Pratt, in visual art, or Alice Munro or Margaret Lawrence, or in literature, or the beautiful documentaries of the National Film Board in the 50s and 60s and 70s.
Not that he was seeing them all in the period.
I caught up with them eventually. When I was in high school, there was a National Film Board office downtown, and a bunch of us geeks would go there on Saturday nights, and a lovely fellow named Logie Donaldson would play us National Film Board movies, but he'd also show us the Marx Brothers. So it was a real education. So for me, it is the Canadian story storytelling that matters so much as reflective of this place that I just think is the best place in the world.
For me, it was a little different. I came to Canada, and I was so ignorant. I was an American. I think those two words can sometimes go together. And I just knew nothing about Canada. And in the beginning, I was stunned by how cold it is. That was a big shock for me, and I didn't like it very much, the cold. And people seemed very reserved. I wasn't used to that. I'm actually a fifth generation Texan, and I found it kind of, these people are a little cool here. But then as I started to see the films, read the books, see the art, watch the news. Like, I honestly fell in love with the news here. I said, y'all seem to tell more of the truth here. Now, I've been here long enough to know that perhaps I was a little naive, but coming from my American perspective, not entirely. I love the realism of things. I love, and this is something we get reflected back from the kids when they watch the movies and stuff. They say it's more like real life. It's like they spend more time on the script in Canada, which isn't true because they don't have the money to spend. Right. There were things I didn't like about Canada, but what made me fall in love with Canada was literally the culture. I fell in love with the books I was reading. I fell in love with the movies I saw. I fell in love with the art I saw. I even fell in love with the news I saw. Because to me, the news just seemed more real than what I was used to in the States. And whether that's totally true or not, it did seem more real. And it did seem like more facts were being presented, more points of view were being discussed, and certainly not as much shouting. And so I just came to, as an immigrant, I came to appreciate the values of this country. I love the diversity here, like as we all do.
Yeah, for sure.
It's something to be so proud of and to enjoy. It's so pleasurable. It's not only good for us, it feels good. And that became values that I cared about. Then as I got older and I saw that my fellow Canadians didn't always feel that way, it hurt my feelings. Like, it was like, what's the matter with you guys? Don't you appreciate what we have here? And when I saw the films, like, I went to see the Canadian movies in the theaters because I was interested. Right. And then when I found out that my fellow filmmakers had seen very few of them, that just seemed wrong. And if they hadn't seen them.
Well, and now we're kind of back to that whole public engagement thing, and why Real Canada exists in the first place. Can we just? Sadly, we're going to have to wrap it up, and I've so enjoyed chatting with you both.
Oh, but come on!
I know, just getting started, right? Just getting out of the gate.
I'm going to just grab hold of the reins for a second.
Yeah, go.
I just want to say a couple of things about National Canadian Film Day. We have some films that are extraordinarily popular this year. So the big choices, the hot choices this year for National Canadian Film Day are The Breadwinner, beautiful animated film about Iran, Indian Horse about Afghanistan. Pardon me.
Interviewed Stephen Campanelli as well.
You have.
I have. Yeah.
That's excellent.
Indian Horse about the residential schools. Maudie, the beautiful film about Maud Lewis, the folk artist, and surprisingly, The Rocket, which is not the newest film, but it's such a good one about Maurice Richard.
And a new film called You Are Here, A Come From Away story. Those are the top 6, I guess.
Yeah. I wanted to mention a couple of the exotic places that we're screening around the world on National Canadian Film Day, including
They're exotic to us.
Quito, Ecuador, Tallinn, Estonia, Yangon in Myanmar. We've got a screening in Bratislava, the Slovak Republic. We're in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. Wow. And those are just a few of the 30 that are happening around the world.
We're also in Vienna and Prague and Paris and Berlin and things like that.
Wow, and you guys aren't fooling around.
We're not fooling around. We're taking no prisoners. We've got special guests. Adam McGoyan is presenting a screening. Colm Fior, Miranda de Ponce with her new movie, The Grizzlies.
Is premiering on that day.
Your friend Alanis Obamsawin is going to fly from Montreal to Vancouver to present a bunch of films there. there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow, what a pleasure meeting you both, and what a
meeting you, David.
What a great time. We've been talking to Jack Blum and Sharon Corder from Reel Canada. That's Reel, REEL, Canada.ca. Thanks to you both for joining me here today on Face to Face. Really appreciate it.
Have
Our
a good
great
time.
pleasure. Thank you.